Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome back. This is my December 2021 monthly recap video, the last one of the year, where I will share a little bit of what I've been up to, my decks that I've worked with the most and have received this month, books that I've read, and some learning about an animal of the month, and then a very little bit of plans for going into next year, specifically about what these videos will look like going into next year. This was the first year ever that I've actually stuck with monthly, end of month recap style videos. So of course I've been thinking about whether I should continue that and what that might look like. So I'll end off with that. But as usual, I guess I'll just start with a bit of general miscellaneous life updates. December has been a bit of a tough month, definitely not the best month. It started out for me really not so well. In the first week of December, just within about a 24-hour time span, I had a visit to the vet. Folks know that my cat has been sick, so I was back at the vet, and then I was at a memorial for a friend who passed a couple of months ago, which brought up, of course, lots of feelings. And then later on in the same evening, my furnace failed, and it is winter in central Ontario right now, and the furnace needed to be replaced. They detected carbon monoxide, so that means it has to go. So December pretty much started off with like the 24-hour time span of just feeling so overloaded in ways that I've never felt overloaded before. Like, to the vet, worrying about being at the vet, that I'm going to be late to the memorial, getting to the memorial, having that time, which was very good in the sense that we finally got to get together, my friends and I, and the community, after months of not really being able to. So it was good in that way, but of course, emotional and difficult in other ways. Came home, went to sleep, woke up freezing, the furnace had failed. So this was just a day of not good. And it definitely, I think, affected how the rest of the month felt. Like I had to deal with all of these things and, deal with replacing a furnace and deal with lots of feelings. And so that was December. Lots of feelings. Things are okay. We are okay. We are processing things. My cat Daryl is doing reasonably well, as far as a cat, trying to get over a bout of triaditis can be. He is, having the medication that he needs. Things are going okay as of right now. And we were able to get the furnace replaced. We only had to be freezing in the house for, a day and a half. And we didn't have any pipes freeze or anything like that. So in terms of averting crisis, things are okay. We're doing okay. It's just a lot, So I didn't necessarily expect, I will say, for the Tarot Vlogmas started by Papa Squirrel to be pretty much the only output on my channel for the entire month. That was not my intention when I started it, but that's kind of where it ended up. I was happy to be participating in it. I really enjoyed seeing other folks' videos for Tarot Vlogmas, and it was nice for me to have that as a kind of I don't want to say low effort, but they're fairly short videos, not too much advanced prep work involved, but something to be participating with other folks and having conversations around, but just really have not felt up to anything else, despite having ideas for lots of other things. It hasn't happened. So now that the semester is over, my final grades are in, with everything going on in the world at the moment. My in-person exams for my students got changed to online exams with 48 hours notice. So that was also a thing to deal with in the middle of the month. But with all of that done, my grades are in, the semester is over, and I've done quite a bit of prep work for next semester, which who knows what that's going to look like at this point. But I have done enough prep work that I'm filming on December 31st. I am actually meaningfully off work, like without things to do, until January 10th. So I feel really good about that. I need this time. I am enjoying this quiet time at home, just with partner and cats, relaxing. Of course, I wish I could be, celebrating New Year's in a more social way than what we've decided to do, which is stay home. But I feel like the time off is so needed, and I'm really happy to have it. I'm grateful for that. And in terms of the channel coming up, I do have quite a few ideas and videos lined up around 2022 visioning and planning and some goals. So I'll be sharing those in the coming days as well. Moving on from the general life updates, which are, not the best this month, but it happens. Decks that I have worked with the most this month, without a doubt, Slow Holler Tarot that I just recently got. I've been enjoying referring to for the Tarot Vlogmas and working with, this has been the wishlist deck for a very long time. And so I'm very grateful, very, very grateful to have a copy. And this has been the tarot deck really that I have been working with the most for December. The other one that I have worked with quite a bit in December, and folks know that I've had cat stress in December with Daryl and his triaditis. I have been working with the Page of Cats Tarot by Tina, Queen of Wands, who's also the creator of course, Naturescapes Tarot and Tarot of Architectural Objects, both of which I love. This cat deck has been like the cuddle that I needed this month as I am dealing with cat-related anxieties and life-related anxieties and all the things. This has just been a comfort and a joy, and also counterpoint to the Slow Hollers, a quite intense deck to work with. So when I'm not feeling quite at that point of wanting to work with something like the Slow Holler, this one has been where I've gone. And I very much appreciate this deck. So that's the Page of Cats Tarot by Tina, Queen of Wands. And I got this, I'm not sure if I've shown this before. I found just on Etsy a knitted pouch for it. Cats love yarn, so that's perfect. And lastly, for decks that I've worked with the most, the Celtic Tree Oracle, which is of course a Ogham deck, as I have fallen in love with Ogham as a system, an alphabet this year. This one has been on my table all month. It has been a deck that I've been doing daily draws with as a prompt for discursive meditation in the morning, which has been great. And I also have another, I made a deck of cue cards for Ogham, just synthesizing things from various books that I've been working with. So I have my little cue cards to help me if I need a little nudge, since it's still a new system to me. But I've really enjoyed this deck as well. Celtic Tree Oracle. For folks who are interested in this deck, I always like to mention there are actually two decks that are both mass market decks, both called Celtic Tree Oracle, both of which are OM decks. This one is by, I think it's Liz and Colin Murray. There is another one as well. They're both OM decks. They're both beautiful. They're very different decks. So this is the one that I have. And I'm really excited to take intermediate OM with Kelly Fitzgerald in the middle of 2022, which is being offered as one of her courses. I took the OM class that she offers, a beginner one, as a playback, so just watching the videos on my own pace. But I'm signing up for the live intermediate OM because this OM is so amazing and so multi-layered and so compelling and so interesting. I'm very excited. So going on from there, decks I've received this month. I've received a few decks this month. I had decided this month to purchase some decks specifically for my Druidry practice and to have a dedicated tarot and oracle for just Druidry related working and exploration. So I thought that I would have to share with you a copy of the Druid Animal Oracle, which is, it's a deck that's been out for a very long time. People have seen the Druid Animal Oracle. It has art by Will Worthington. But unfortunately, my copy of the Druid Animal Oracle arrived damaged. Like the cards, the fronts of several of the cards were damaged. And so I had to return it to the bookstore that I got it from. And so I'm still waiting to have the Druid Animal Oracle. But that is a deck that I purchased for myself this month that I'm very much looking forward to, but it will be into the new year before my copy of the Druid Animal Oracle arrives. It had initially been a deck that, I really liked the artwork. I didn't necessarily plan on adding it to my collection just because I do have quite a few animal decks, and the Druid Animal Oracle mixes in things like dragons, which I would always take cards like that out if I'm using a animal deck, which I will with the Druid Animal Oracle as well. But since adopting a Druid practice, the Druid Animal Oracle has interested me a lot more, as has the book, which older versions of the Druid Animal Oracle have a much more substantive book than what comes with it now, which gets into the animals in the context of Druidry and Celtic mythology and things like this. So I found a really affordable copy of that old Druid Animal Oracle book on eBay. So I'm waiting for that. It was, a seller in my province, not expensive at all. So I'm just going to get the new version of the deck that doesn't come with the book, and then get the book, as opposed to trying to find a, often rather expensive of the older version that came with the book. So that's the deck that I got. I also got for my Druidry tarot deck a deck that is a very, very unexpected deck for me. And I ended up picking up a copy of the Wildwood Tarot by Mark Ryan and John Matthews, also with art by Will Worthington, which was one of the things that appealed to me. I really like his artwork. This deck, and I'm not going to get it out because it's still like in the packaging. I haven't gotten into this yet. This just came. The Wildwood Tarot is one that hadn't really been on my radar again, because this deck kind of violates every rule for decks that I have. This deck has so many things about it that I would say are either just things that I don't care for, characteristics that I don't buy decks like. I have not been buying mass market decks really for quite some time. In terms of tarot decks, I just haven't. This deck has keywords. Everyone knows that I don't like keywords, or people who watch my channel know that I don't like keywords. But in thinking about a deck to work with in the context of Druidry practice, I'm thinking about the fact that in the context of the AODA work that I'm doing, presuming that I get to go on to the second degree at some point in 2022, then for the second degree, I'm going to be reading the Mabinogion, which is a collection of medieval Welsh and Celtic tales that were written down around the mid 1300s, late 1300s. And there is some components of learning about Celtic mythology and Celtic stories, and also the Druidry that I'm practicing and the Druid group that I'm a part of observes the solstices and equinoxes. This deck is based on the Wheel of the Year, and it certainly has, Celtic and pre-Celtic components, like very, very strongly in it, which will, I think, work well with reading those stories that I'll be working with in the new year in the second degree. I really like about this deck, in terms of things that would appeal to me regardless of the Druid practice. All of the court cards are animals. I feel like a lot of the cards aren't too strongly gendered, which I really, really like in terms of their actual depictions. So there's lots of things that I do like about this deck. It is also, though, one that is a really weird one for me to pick, because of, animal heads on humanoid bodies. Also a thing that I have said before that I do not care for. Keywords on the minors, not my thing either. But this is the deck that stood out to me for decks that I could find that felt really like it would go with my Druidry practice well. I did look at the Druidcraft too. The Druidcraft tarot feels very Wiccan to me. For folks who don't know, Druidcraft refers to a kind of synthesis of Druidry and Wicca. I am not Wiccan. So, this one was the one that definitely stood out more. So I'm looking forward to exploring with this very unexpected deck. Other decks that I've received this month, that I did not buy this month, I received my copy of the Tarot of the Pacific Northwest Tarot by Brendan Marnell. And this deck was a Kickstarter, I think earlier this year, that I was happy to back because it's animals. I do not have any connection in any clear way to the Pacific Northwest as a region, but an animal deck I'm a sucker for. It's still in order. I'm still reading the guidebook. These are the beautiful backs. I really like these. It has this kind of gray-black edging, and it's a beautiful animal deck. And I really like how the guidebook tells kind of a little story about the animal and what the animal is doing as a way of conveying the message of the card and the relationship between the choice of animal and the card that it appears on. So there's a lot that I really like about the design of this deck. I really like the color palette. All the animals chosen feel very deliberate. And even though I'm not from and don't live in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of the animals, of course, are animals that also live where I live, and so are familiar to me. And I will also say, I'm not sure exactly how the creator went about this, but I have never had a deck arrive to me as quickly as this one from when it shipped. I don't remember paying an excessive amount for shipping, which sometimes I do feel like I'm paying an excessive amount for shipping just because shipping is expensive, particularly when a deck is coming from the United States and I don't live in the United States. But this deck, I got the email that it had shipped and then it was here instantaneously. It felt like it was about 4 days, but it felt pretty instantaneous, particularly considering how, customs usually takes a while, and with the flooding and so on that's been happening in British Columbia anything that's been routed through the West Coast has taken longer. And I know the creator is of course in the Northwest and on the West Coast. I love this tower. So this deck arrived very quickly. I didn't necessarily expect that, but I love the loon for the moon. This makes me very happy. I love loons. And I'm almost at the end of the majors, so I might as well just show you the rest. But I was excited to receive this one from Kickstarter, and I'm very happy and looking forward to getting to know this deck better as I read the lovely guidebook. I haven't been feeling particularly inclined lately to do things like unboxings and first impressions and that. I know that I'm sure there's probably plenty of this deck with a full walkthrough. It's really, really beautiful deck, the Pacific Northwest Tarot. And then I also received a deck from my family for a holiday gift. And this is a deck that has been, of course, out for a long time. It's a deck that has been on and off my wish list as a kind of learning tool deck, but that I had never picked up for myself. And so I decided to just put it on my holiday wish list. We do a little holiday wish list, so I did, and it was the Living Wheel astrology cards by Patrick Fogarty of the Living Wheel. And these are, of course, astrology cards. They have a gold edging, and they have cards for each of the astrological planets there, and the moon phases, and they have cards for the nodes there, and all the different planets. And something that I really liked about this deck, in terms of choosing to add it to my collection, or ask kindly to have it added to my collection, I really like that there's constellations for each sign, but then also really like, this is one of the main draws actually, that it has cards for the houses. Because the other astrology deck that I have, which I also love, the Arcana of Astrology by Black the Moon, I have the older version of that deck that doesn't have house cards. I think that the newer, the mass market one does actually have house cards, but my version doesn't. So in terms of laying out my birth chart, for example, I really like that these house cards are included, as well as the seasonal cards, which I plan to have out on my Druidry Sacred Space to change out every season. Very excited to have this deck. This deck, I knew this deck would be beautiful. I knew this deck would be, well made and everything for sure. It is more beautiful in person than it is online, I will tell you. Living Wheel astrology cards. Very happy with those. So those are the decks that I have to share with you this month. Moving on to books that I have read and finished this month. I only finished 5 books this month, which is fewer than usual. Part of that is because I also finished about 100 term papers and about 100 exams. So I did lots of reading this month. Most of it was not books that I'm going to share with you, but I found some time to read some books anyway. I also had one did not finish book this month, a novel that not finishing was a combination of things. Certainly it was definitely a book that kind of required every content warning you could think of, in ways that I didn't quite expect, and that had part of to do with it. I also found it sexist. So I did have a novel that I tried really hard and read over half of, but ended up putting down. So that's also why I read less in terms of finished books to share my thoughts with you this month. But I did read 5. One that I read that was very short, a Pagan Portals book. Pagan Portals books are always very short. is The Hedge Druid's Craft by Joanna Vanderhoeven. And this is an introduction to the idea of hedge druidry. And I really liked it. It is mostly a description of the author's own practices. It is not really a how-to, but it is an inspiring little book to read in terms of the author's own druid practice, and she's a member of OBOD, I believe. And so that was a good short read. Certainly gave me some ideas, and I've picked up, she has a longer book on hedge druidry, more full length. Like the Pagan Portals, for folks who don't know, are like 100 pages long or so, very, very introductory, defining terms. And, if you'd perhaps never encountered druidry before, the Hedge Druid's Craft would give you some understanding in that way. But she has a bigger book on hedge druidry, and so this book I liked enough to buy her longer book, and I'm looking forward to reading that. I haven't yet, but I enjoyed the Hedge Druid's Craft quite a bit. I find the Pagan Portals books a little bit mixed. Universally, I think they could really use a little bit of editing. I'm not really sure what's up with that, but I thought it was a good one. I thought it was overall really well done. She did make the strange to me claim that contemporary druidry started in the 1950s, which just feels really arbitrary considering, for example, that the AODA has been around way longer than that. The only thing that I could think of in terms of starting in the 50s would be perhaps the iteration of the Wheel of the Year that emerged then through the work of Gerald Gardner and Ross Nichols, but I wouldn't say that is so pivotal that I would call it the emergence of contemporary druidry. So that was a bit of a weird claim to me to make, but other than that, I really liked the Hedge Druid's Craft. I thought it was a good introduction to those ideas. I also read, this is the only book that I have a physical copy to show you of, and it's an embarrassing physical copy to show you, I think. This is the only reread for me the entire year, I think. This is the only book that I've actually reread, and that is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin, one of my all-time favorite authors, one of my favorite books. This is embarrassing. I swear I'm not that person in the book club. I swear I'm not. The reason that I reread this is because it was picked for Seiji, the Artisan Geeks book club, the Diverse Classics book club. There's a vote every month on the book, and this one won. And so I decided to read it again. We'll be discussing it in January. And this is my teaching copy. I have taught this book in a third-year philosophy class. I haven't taught that class in a couple of years, but when I did, I taught this book, and the students had an assignment based on this book, and that's why there's this color-coded ridiculousness. I don't do this with every book I read, I promise you. And I did not do this for the book club, so it's all good. But this book is a very special book for me. I feel like, okay, so for folks who don't know anything about this book, this is about a emissary from what in the book is called Terra, is functionally Earth, who goes to another planet to make connections and invite that planet to join a kind of federation of planets. Not the Federation of, not Star Trek, but something like that, a little bit. The Ecumen is what it's called in this book. And he goes to this planet, and the human-like aliens who live on this planet have no sex and no gender the vast majority of the time. They take on sexual characteristics in a kind of reproductive cycle, but do not have them for most of the time. And so the book is really this human emissary, Genlii, coming to navigate this society that is very different than what he's used to, and getting to know people there, and then the kind of power politicking of a couple of different countries on that planet, who have different political systems and different interests vis-a-vis Genly's mission. And this book is so good. I very highly recommend this book. And also, Ursula Le Guin wrote a couple of short stories that are set in the same planet as this book. One is called Winter's King. The other is called Coming of Age in Karhide. They're anthologized all over the place. Also both very, very good. I love this book, and I can't wait to discuss it. Also, I will say this book has one of the best, it's very short, one of the best author introductions of all time. Even if you're not really interested in the novel, you should read the introduction to this book because it's brilliant. So that was one. A reread. I've read it probably 3 or 4 times now. It always makes me happy. I also read for a book club, for Katie Flowers Blossom Book Club. We read, or I finished in early December. Technically, it was November's book, but then we met in December, so I technically finished it in December. Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice by Leah Lakshmi Pyapsna Samarasina. And this book I had heard of. I'm familiar with the author's work from other contexts. And it was a really, really good book. It was challenging, certainly, in terms of unpacking the real pervasiveness of ableism in all different kinds of spaces, including, I would say particularly for me as a reader, including in activist spaces. And I'm just really grateful that this book exists. I will revisit it for sure. So that's Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice. I don't have a ton to say about it beyond the fact that I found it a very important read, an urgent read, and that I recommend it. I read a forthcoming space opera novel called Under Fortunate Stars by Wren Hutchings, and this is a debut novel, I believe, that is Wren Hutchings' first book. And Under Fortunate Stars is coming out in 2022, and it deals broadly, we'll say, with time travel, and it's an adventure, a time traveling adventure, or a stuck out of time adventure with others who are also stuck out of time from a different time. Time travel is not necessarily usually my favorite thing, but this was really fun. Under Fortunate Stars was really fun. It includes a multi-perspective way of writing, so different chapters from different characters' perspectives who are in the crew. And I don't want to give too much away in case someone decides that they're really interested in reading it, but certainly with it being a kind of time travel book, you have this kind of element of people from the present, or the more forward time period anyway in the book, meeting people who to them are historical figures, and historical figures who are actually quite important to them. And so I always think that that's an interesting thing, and I thought that was portrayed really well. It was, in some points, it kind of read like a film, particularly these kind of action scenes where somebody, makes it where they're trying to go at the very, very last second, right before the big explosion that, if they were 1 second too late, would have been terrible. So it was a fun read. And the last book that I just finished, was The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. This was one of the books that came out in 2021 this year that I had wanted to read, and I'm just getting to now. I've read some of Sarah Gailey's work before. They've written, I think, several novellas that I've read anyway. I think this was the first longer book, which also still wasn't very long. And The Echo Wife deals with cloning. And the Echo Wife follows Evelyn, who is a scientist working in human cloning, whose husband has left her for a clone of her. That's not a spoiler because that's basically on the back of the book, like the description of the book. So that's what I had in my mind going in, that it would deal with some of the ethical complexities of human cloning, that it would deal with some questions around kind of individual uniqueness, if there's a clone of you kind of thing. And it did deal with those things, but it was a really heavy one. And the whole time, reading The Echo Wife, it deals a lot with this narrator who's a scientist working on clones really talks about them in this very their research subject, right? She knows that they're sentient, that they have feelings, that they at least seem to have memories, that they have emotions and all of these things, but like to her they are objects, right? They're medical products or like experimental products, and she's working in the private sector too, so there's all kinds of ethical questions around growing human clones for organs and as body doubles for politicians who are threatened and all of these kind of things, and it's a very hard perspective to inhabit as the first person's perspective, being this scientist who has a very cold, very, very cold, very distanced view of these human clones, including the one that is her, right? That is a clone of herself. But really what the book is about is abuse in relationships, and the dynamic with the with the husband and the main character, and also with the clone character. It hit a place that I didn't think that it was going to hit when I was reading it. And it was excellent. It was excellent. I recommend it. I recommend it with the content warning that this is absolutely a book about spousal abuse. I did not know the extent to which that was the case going in, if any. But it was really good. It was really, really good, and it was really, in terms of capturing that, at least in terms of my lived experience, it was very, very well done. So that's The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. Excellent. So that's the books that I've read this month, 5 of them. And I'm excited to talk more about books. Coming up, I will be sharing my book stack of joy for 2022. I do have the aspiration to read all of my unread hard copy books again. I did this a couple of years ago before I buy any new hard copy books, with a very few caveats of if I need a book for work or something. So I'm going to share what's on my book stack of joy, formerly known as the book stack of shame, but there is no shame in wanting to read. So it is the book stack of joy now, and I'll share that in a couple of days. Finally, my animal of the month for this month is the American Kestrel, and this card is from the Birds Oracle deck by Jessica Blaine Smith and Mia Emily Freeman, as I look down at the book. And so, something about this. I see American Kestrels all the time. But we would call them sparrowhawk. And you see them in particular by the sides of the road. By the sides of the highway, they sit on fence posts and things like that, beside fields and so on. So I didn't know that the sparrowhawk and the American kestrel were the same thing. But now I do. So I went to, actually, I'll share what's in the guidebook for the deck in a second, because that's where I've kind of landed on how I think of the American kestrel as well. But I've got all these books for my Druidry study, and one of them is this Ontario Nature Guide, right? Which I had just recently read, which has an entry for the American Kestrel in it. And it starts off, American Kestrel, length 19 to 20 centimeters, wingspan 51 to 61 centimeters. The colorful American Kestrel, formerly known as the sparrowhawk. So it turns out I'm just out of date. I'm out of date with Kestrel nomenclature. So the lesson of this month from the American Kestrel is that I'm out of date. There you go. I've been calling it an outdated name for my whole life. Maybe for part of my life it wasn't an outdated name, I don't know, but American Kestrel, it is. And what the Ontario Nature Guide says about them is that they are common and widespread, not shy of human activity, and adaptable to habitat change. This small falcon has benefited from the grassy rights of way created by Ontario's highways, which provide habitat for grasshoppers and other small prey. Watch for this robin-sized bird along rural roadways, perched on poles and telephone wires, or over agricultural fields foraging for insects and small mammals. So this is a bird that is here only seasonally. So they're not here now. So I couldn't get to go see one. During this past month, they do migrate, and I'm kind of on the very north, I think, end of where they go. So it's too cold for them right now. But once I discovered that this was in fact the sparrowhawk, which it's the American Kestrel, it's not called the sparrowhawk. I feel like what this bird conveys is a kind of strategic reorientation, right? A strategic reorientation to things in the environment, including things in the environment that may be disruptive, because they really do, utilize human structures like fences and what is this called? Like wires, like telephone wires and things like this to use as perches while they're hunting to get a better view. They really are seen, for the most part, in my experience, around land that is more cultivated, land that has been cleared, fields and so on are where they like to be. So very much the sparrowhawk, I think, has to do with and is a reminder to think about one's environment and to use what's there. And from the guidebook, actually, I don't like to look at these too much like right at the start of the month. I like to look later after I've formulated my own ideas. And the meaning that the creators of the deck have come up with actually does kind of go with where I had ended up as well. They write that on any road trip in North America, you will spot at least one on a wire if you look hard enough. Rarely do you ever see them doing anything else. It's true. I don't ever see them doing anything else. But we know that they do, for every living thing on Earth needs to eat, and the kestrel is a skilled hunter. I have seen them hunt, for sure. The kestrel knows when to attack and when to be still. This card is your sign to think twice before making that jump. Spend time thinking about your next move before making it. Don't leap blindly into the situation. Be sure to cross all your T's and dot all of your I's before making this change. So in terms of my experience of this bird, that's not quite where I ended up, but it's close. In the sense that I was thinking about them as being a kind of getting a kind of strategic angle on things, from a good vantage point that is available to you, in the way that they go to the fence posts and the power lines to get a view of potential food. So that's the American Kestrel. In terms of choosing an animal for January, I had really wanted to have my Druid Animal Oracle to pick an animal for January, because what I was thinking would be that the Druid Animal Oracle, I would do either a year ahead spread with one animal per month, or just use that deck consistently for the entire year. I've been enjoying mixing up the decks and picking from different decks on one hand, but on the other hand, it has been harder to avoid like duplicates, because I have to go through and find them, remove the duplicates. And also, I found, and I totally don't need to do this, but I've just found myself doing this. Whenever I've picked an animal card, like say, this one for December, I'll have then the rest of the deck in its box in a specific area of my shelf where it's like, these are decks that aren't complete right now. The cards are out somewhere, right? I keep those decks somewhere else just so that I don't forget to put the card back, and I don't accidentally just shelve the deck when all the cards aren't there. And that has actually led me to using these decks less. So like, while this card is out, for example, for all of December, then the Birds Oracle deck box has been in the incomplete deck pile, and therefore not one that I have reached for the entire month. So in terms of using my animal decks more in readings throughout any given month, whichever ones I'm most drawn to, I thought that instead of mixing up the decks each month this year, that instead I would use the Druid Animal Oracle, since I do want to have that as a learning deck with regard to stories and tales that Druidry draws on, and I would just have that as my animal card for the month for the whole year. But I don't have the deck here. So what I thought I would do is pick one, see if there's a card of the day that we can use I downloaded the app on my phone. Yes, that's my phone. So I downloaded the app of Druid Oracles, which has the Druid Plant and Animal Oracle in one app. So I thought that I would just click today's card, and provided that it's an animal and not a plant, go with that as the animal for January. If it comes up a plant, then I'll just go back and click draw a card until an animal is chosen. So to pick a new animal of the month using the Druid Plant and Animal Oracle app. I will have the deck next time. This has kind of thrown my plans for my year ahead spread, but that's okay. So let's see here. Well, you can't see actually because there's a huge glare. To click today's card. Today's card is the otter. There's the otter. So I will be learning about the otter this month. And this deck, for folks who don't know about this, this deck I've learned that in the borders of this deck, there's the different kind of plant icons going around. You probably can't see this. That are a message in Ogham. So I'm looking forward to that. So the otter for January, as I make a mess and drop things off my desk. Okay, so I said that I would end with plans for the coming year in terms of monthly recap videos. I didn't necessarily think that I would stick with this. When I committed to this, I'm not good at consistency. I'm working on it. But I kind of started doing these videos at the end of the month as a kind of, in part, accountability thing for myself, in part, documenting things for myself, keeping track of what I've been working with, looking back at the month. It's a good kind of excuse or way for me to make sure that I'm looking back at the month in the ways that I want to. I didn't necessarily think that these videos would be particularly interesting, in that it's just me rambling about stuff that I've been doing. but actually, I've really appreciated the kind comments that I've received on these monthly recap videos, and I've really enjoyed making them. So I am going to stick with them going forward into 2022 and do another year of recap videos. I think I'm going to stick to much of the same format as I have done for 2021. The only things I will mention is that I am going to stick with the Druid Animal Oracle for the animal of the month for all of 2022. That is the plan. And I will also say that it will probably be a few months before I get to picking TBR cards at the end, and I'm not going to pick TBR cards at the end right now to inspire my reading, because I will be doing Book Stack of Joy and reading the books that I have for 2022. So those little bits at the end of the monthly recap will be a little bit different, but other than that, I plan to be back with an update at the end of January. So I wish you all a very happy new year. May 2022 be substantially better than 2021. I will see you all in the new year. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and all the best wishes to you. Bye.